In the heart of a vast land where the sun melted into the soil each evening, and the trees whispered the secrets of centuries past, there lay a village untouched by time. The villagers called it Aguama, nestled between 7 giant baobab trees, whose swollen trunks seemed to cradle the very soul of the earth. Birds with feathers of deep green and gold sang at dawn, and monkeys laughed in the trees at dusk as if joining in the village gossip. The air was always thick with the scent of earth, herbs, smoke and something else, something old. The elders would say it was the scent of spirits watching from just beyond the veil of the visible world. Naya was born under a crimson moon, and the midwives said it was a bad omen. But her grandmother, Mama Agba, dismissed their mutterings with a spit and a wave of her hand. "This girl carries fire," she'd said, clutching the infant to her breast. "Not the kind that burns homes but the kind that lights paths." Mama Agba, known throughout Aguama and the surrounding villages as the healer, midwife and spirit whisperer, raised Naya with a mixture of iron discipline and wild love. She taught the girl about the plants that could heal and those that could kill, the way wind patterns revealed messages from ancestors, and how dreams sometimes told truths hidden by daylight. Naya had no memory of her parents. Some said they died in a storm, others whispered they vanished into the forest never to return. But Naya never asked. The hole where her parents' faces should have been didn't ache. Mama Agba filled that space with stories, lessons, and the kind of love that was as constant as the pulse of the earth beneath her bare feet. She was different though, and everyone saw it. She spoke to animals as if they understood. She would sit by the river and listen to it like one listens to a storyteller. Once, she placed her hand on the cracked bark of a dying baobab and whispered a song her grandmother had taught her. The next season, the tree flowered with a vigor that surprised even the elders. The children in the village laughed at her. Some mocked the way she walked alone, her head in the clouds. Others threw pebbles when Mama Agba wasn't looking. Her cousin Zina, who was a few seasons older and lived in the house across the footpath, was the worst. Her jealousy was a fire that smoldered behind her eyes. Where Naya had quiet grace, Zina had sharp ambition. Where Naya healed injured birds, Zina pulled the wings off butterflies just to see them crawl. Still Naya endured. She learned to keep her eyes soft even when her heart hardened. She smiled when the laughter hurt and said nothing when Zina knocked over her basket of herbs. "Let your silence speak," Mama Agba would say, "for those who shout the loudest often fear the quiet truth." The village of Aguama, though rooted in beauty, held darkness too. Tradition ran deep like the roots of the baobabs, and not all traditions were kind. There were rituals meant to preserve order, and punishments reserved for those who dared stray from the prescribed path. In whispers, Naya had heard the stories of the thorn walk, a cruel path reserved for the worst offenders, women and girls accused of dishonor, disobedience, or witchery. The stories painted horrifying pictures: feet torn and bleeding, cries swallowed by the singing of drums, and no one, absolutely no one, who dared intervene. It was said the path was cursed, a test of flesh and spirit. Few returned from it the same. Some never returned at all. Naya never imagined that path would be part of her own story. But the winds were shifting. The old baobabs groaned more at night, and crows had begun to gather on their branches in unusual numbers. Mama Agba had grown restless, her dreams clouded with warnings. One evening, as they prepared roots by the fire, she looked at Naya with eyes heavy like rain clouds. "Your time will come, child," she murmured, her voice like cracking bark. "They will hurt you. But from pain you will rise higher than even they can imagine." Naya didn't understand. But something inside her stirred, deep, ancient, and waiting. In the days that followed, the village seemed to grow colder toward her. Elders watched her with narrowed eyes, murmuring to each other behind palms. Zina's words grew more cutting, her smile more poisonous. A shadow followed Naya wherever she went, not a spirit, but the heavy press of something cruel taking shape. Still she gathered herbs. Still she tended to the wounds of careless children and the cracked hands of laborers. Still she sat beneath the tallest baobab at sunset, singing her grandmother's lullabies to the spirits in the wind. In her heart she knew something was coming. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was how far her journey would take her. From humiliation to power, from thorns to thunder, from the forgotten girl in a lonely village to a name whispered in both fear and reverence across the land. And so her story began as many do, not with glory but with silence. Not with strength but with a wound. A girl born under a crimson moon, about to walk a path carved with pain, destined to shake the very roots of the world that once tried to bury her. In the heart of a vast land where the sun melted into the soil each evening, and the trees whispered the secrets of centuries past, there lay a village untouched by time. The villagers called it Aguama, nestled between 7 giant baobab trees, whose swollen trunks seemed to cradle the very soul of the earth. Birds with feathers of deep green and gold sang at dawn, and monkeys laughed in the trees at dusk as if joining in the village gossip. The air was always thick with the scent of earth, herbs, smoke and something else, something old. The elders would say it was the scent of spirits watching from just beyond the veil of the visible world. Naya was born under a crimson moon, and the midwives said it was a bad omen. But her grandmother, Mama Agba, dismissed their mutterings with a spit and a wave of her hand. "This girl carries fire," she'd said, clutching the infant to her breast, "not the kind that burns homes but the kind that lights paths." Mama Agba, known throughout Aguama and the surrounding villages as the healer, midwife and spirit whisperer, raised Naya with a mixture of iron discipline and wild love. She taught the girl about the plants that could heal and those that could kill, the way wind patterns revealed messages from ancestors, and how dreams sometimes told truths hidden by daylight. Naya had no memory of her parents. Some said they died in a storm, others whispered they vanished into the forest never to return. But Naya never asked. The hole where her parents' faces should have been didn't ache. Mama Agba filled that space with stories, lessons, and the kind of love that was as constant as the pulse of the earth beneath her bare feet. She was different though, and everyone saw it. She spoke to animals as if they understood. She would sit by the river and listen to it like one listens to a storyteller. Once, she placed her hand on the cracked bark of a dying baobab and whispered a song her grandmother had taught her. The next season, the tree flowered with a vigor that surprised even the elders. The children in the village laughed at her. Some mocked the way she walked alone, her head in the clouds. Others threw pebbles when Mama Agba wasn't looking. Her cousin Zina, who was a few seasons older and lived in the house across the footpath, was the worst. Her jealousy was a fire that smoldered behind her eyes. Where Naya had quiet grace, Zina had sharp ambition. Where Naya healed injured birds, Zina pulled the wings off butterflies just to see them crawl. Still Naya endured. She learned to keep her eyes soft even when her heart hardened. She smiled when the laughter hurt and said nothing when Zina knocked over her basket of herbs. "Let your silence speak," Mama Agba would say, "for those who shout the loudest often fear the quiet truth." The village of Aguama, though rooted in beauty, held darkness too. Tradition ran deep like the roots of the baobabs, and not all traditions were kind. There were rituals meant to preserve order, and punishments reserved for those who dared stray from the prescribed path. In whispers, Naya had heard the stories of the thorn walk, a cruel path reserved for the worst offenders, women and girls accused of dishonor, disobedience, or witchery. The stories painted horrifying pictures: feet torn and bleeding, cries swallowed by the singing of drums, and no one, absolutely no one, who dared intervene. It was said the path was cursed, a test of flesh and spirit. Few returned from it the same. Some never returned at all. Naya never imagined that path would be part of her own story. But the winds were shifting. The old baobabs groaned more at night, and crows had begun to gather on their branches in unusual numbers. Mama Agba had grown restless, her dreams clouded with warnings. One evening, as they prepared roots by the fire, she looked at Naya with eyes heavy like rain clouds. "Your time will come, child," she murmured, her voice like cracking bark. "They will hurt you. But from pain you will rise higher than even they can imagine." Naya didn't understand. But something inside her stirred, deep, ancient, and waiting. In the days that followed, the village seemed to grow colder toward her. Elders watched her with narrowed eyes, murmuring to each other behind palms. Zina's words grew more cutting, her smile more poisonous. A shadow followed Naya wherever she went, not a spirit, but the heavy press of something cruel taking shape. Still she gathered herbs. Still she tended to the wounds of careless children and the cracked hands of laborers. Still she sat beneath the tallest baobab at sunset, singing her grandmother's lullabies to the spirits in the wind. In her heart she knew something was coming. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was how far her journey would take her. From humiliation to power, from thorns to thunder, from the forgotten girl in a lonely village to a name whispered in both fear and reverence across the land. And so her story began as many do, not with glory but with silence. Not with strength but with a wound. A girl born under a crimson moon, about to walk a path carved with pain, destined to shake the very roots of the world that once tried to bury her. Go ahead and send the next part of the outline when you're ready. The air in Aguama grew heavier with each passing day. The sky, once a canvas of laughter and color, now hung low like a warning. The villagers, usually busy with their farming and weaving, paused longer in their gossip, casting side glances at Naya whenever she passed. Children no longer ran to her for healing leaves or stories. The silence that followed her footsteps now felt like a curse. It began subtly. One morning Mama Agba awoke to find her jars of sacred herbs, those used only for the most powerful healing rituals, shattered and spilled across the floor. The gourd that held the dust of the ahimu leaf, a rare and dangerous plant that could kill or cure, lay broken beside a bloody footprint. Naya had gasped when she saw it. She and Mama Agba had handled that gourd with reverence. To touch it without purpose was to invite misfortune. Who would do this? Naya asked, her voice trembling. But Mama Agba only stared at the door as if someone, or something, stood just beyond it. By midday 2 village guards arrived, spears in hand and suspicion on their faces. Naya stood frozen as they accused her of stealing sacred herbs and using them to cast love spells on the chief's son. Such an act, if proven true, was not just taboo, it was punishable by the thorn walk. Mama Agba shouted in protest, but her voice was old and weary, and the guards would not hear her. Naya's pleas fell like stones into a well. No one listened. The council of elders gathered beneath the largest baobab tree, draped in feathers and red beads. At their center sat the chief's wife, Nalia, her gaze sharp and unreadable. Beside her, with a snake's smile, stood Zena. She looked innocent, concerned even, but Naya knew better. There was a gleam in her eye that only Naya could read. It was the look of someone who had finally struck the blow they had long waited to land. "Speak, girl," an elder growled. "Did you or did you not touch the forbidden herbs?" "I didn't," Naya said firmly, her heart pounding. "I would never. Ask my grandmother. She is your blood." "Her word is biased," Nalia said coolly. "We found traces of the herbs in your sleeping mat. Your hands smell of ahimu. What more do you need?" Naya's mouth fell open. Someone had planted them. Her eyes flicked to Zena, whose smile flickered for a split second. But in that moment, the decision had already been made. "Let her walk the path," one elder said. "No." Mama Agba cried, pushing forward, her hands trembling. "You know my granddaughter. You know her heart. The spirits must judge her," another elder said gravely. "Let the thorns speak." Naya's feet were bound and stripped bare. The villagers gathered, some whispering, others silent, eyes wide as though watching a play unfold. The path had been prepared. A long winding trail lined with sharp, blackened thorns dipped in poison from the gem plant, which caused slow, burning pain and fever. No one had walked it in 3 seasons. Not since a woman who'd spoken against the chief had returned with her mind shattered, screaming at the moon until her last breath. Naya stood at the mouth of the path, the sky gray above her, the world hushed. She searched the crowd, hoping for one voice, one face, one soul brave enough to cry injustice. But none came. Even Mama Agba had been held back, her cries muffled behind the arms of 2 guards. She stepped forward. The first thorn pierced the ball of her foot like a blade. A sharp cry tore from her throat. The poison burned instantly, a fire licking up her ankle. She faltered, her breath hitching, but the rhythm of the drums behind her ordered her on. Step by step, thorn by thorn she walked. Pain became a second heartbeat. Her skin split. Blood soaked the earth. The villagers watched in horrified fascination. Some turned away. Some looked as though they wanted to cry, but none did. The law was the law. Naya's body screamed for release. Her legs trembled. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The sky spun above her. Her vision blurred, not from tears, but from heat rising inside her. Fever had begun its cruel dance. Her mind swam with voices, whispers, songs, things she couldn't name. She stumbled and fell. The thorns tore her arms as she tried to push herself up. The drums continued. Somewhere in the crowd, Zena smiled. Naya dragged herself forward, inch by inch, her blood leaving a path behind her. Her skin glistened with sweat and agony. Every thorn whispered cruelty into her bones. The world grew darker. Her heartbeat slowed. Then the drums stopped. A shadow passed overhead. A sound, one clear caw, cut through the silence. The villagers looked up. High above, a large black crow circled once, then twice before diving downward with impossible speed. It landed on a branch beside the path, head tilted, eyes fixed on Naya. It let out another cry, louder this time, and the leaves around it rustled as if a storm had passed. Naya, barely conscious, felt the wind shift. The pain dulled suddenly, not vanished but distant, like a memory instead of a moment. The ground felt soft beneath her. She blinked and saw the crow again, closer now, perched just inches away. It blinked once. Then everything went dark. The villagers gasped as Naya's body vanished before their eyes. One moment she lay bloodied on the path, the next she was gone, no trace, no scream, no soul. Some ran. Others dropped to their knees. Even the elders stepped back in confusion and fear. Zena's face lost its triumph. The chief's wife whispered something under her breath, her voice shaking. And in the high branches of the baobab, the crow took flight, its wings casting shadows that danced like spirits across the ground. Naya was gone. But her story was only beginning. The world returned to Naya not all at once but in pieces, first sound, then scent, then the feel of cool earth beneath her skin. She blinked slowly, eyes raw and swollen, as dappled light filtered through a canopy of green above her. The air was thick with the perfume of unknown blossoms and the soft rustle of leaves moved by no wind. A gurgling stream whispered nearby, and birdsong threaded its way through the silence, gentle and strange, unlike any she had known in Aguama. She tried to sit up, but her limbs rebelled. Pain, dull and lingering, throbbed in her feet, though the searing fire of the poison was gone. A soft voice spoke nearby, old and cracked like the bark of a sacred tree, yet soothing like warm broth. Do not move, child. Your spirit still returns to your body. Naya turned her head, and there sat a woman, ancient beyond words. Her skin was deep brown, with lines carved like river paths across her face. Her eyes, milky yet aware, bore the calm of someone who had seen centuries unfold. She wore a robe woven from vines and feathers, and around her neck hung charms carved from bone and stone. Her hands worked over a bowl filled with steaming herbs, her fingers nimble and sure. Where am I? Naya croaked, her voice barely more than a rasp. You are in the spirit grove, the woman replied, pressing a cool cloth to Naya's forehead. I'm Magura. The crow brought you here before your soul slipped away. The spirit grove. Naya had heard whispers of it in the tales told by Mama Agba. A place between life and death, hidden deep in the forest where the veil between the living and the dead thinned. Only those chosen by fate, or spirits, could find it. It was neither myth nor map. It simply was. Naya drifted in and out of sleep. Fever dreams wrapped around her. Flickers of glowing eyes in the dark, laughter from trees, rivers that whispered names, and the sound of drums not from her village but from somewhere far older. Each time she woke, Magura was there, feeding her, changing her poultices, speaking words and languages Naya had never heard but somehow understood. Days passed, perhaps weeks. Time had no meaning in the grove. The stars moved differently, and the sun sometimes rose in silence, sometimes with a chorus of spirit song. When Naya could finally sit up without pain, Magura handed her a bowl of broth and sat beside her without speaking. The silence between them was full, not empty. That night, under a sky painted with unfamiliar stars, Magura brought her to the edge of a shallow pool. The water glowed faintly, and its surface reflected not Naya's face, but 1,000 flickering figures. Some danced. Some wept. Some simply watched her. They are the ancestors, Magura said. They see you. They have chosen to speak. Naya stepped forward, heart pounding. As she gazed into the pool, one figure rose clearer than the rest. A woman regal and tall, with hair like braided lightning and a cloak of night. Her voice rang not in Naya's ears but in her bones. You are marked, child, the spirit said. Your blood sings with old magic, buried and forgotten. You were betrayed by kin and cast aside, but you are not broken. You are becoming. Naya fell to her knees, tears in her eyes. Why me? Because you endured, the spirit answered. But you must understand, revenge born of hatred consumes the soul. Seek not vengeance but balance. The water rippled and more spirits emerged, each offering fragments of truth. One revealed Zena's deceit, how she had stolen the herbs and planted them in Naya's mat. Another showed the chief's wife paying a silent bribe to the guards. Naya's chest burned with fury, but she clenched her fists and swallowed it down. You will have your moment, Magura whispered, but you must first know yourself. Thus began her training. Each day Magura guided her through rituals older than memory. She learned to feel the pulse of the trees and listen to the stories told by fire. She drank bitter teas that opened her vision and allowed her to walk the paths of dreams, speaking with spirits who tested her with riddles and trials. One night she was sent into the forest blindfolded, tasked with finding a stone that sang. Another, she had to sit in silence beneath a tree for 3 days, waiting for it to speak a truth she had not yet learned. Naya's body grew stronger. Her feet, once bloodied and torn, now carried her swiftly over stone and soil. The scars remained but they no longer burned, they glowed faintly in moonlight as if etched with the breath of ancestors. Her hands, once timid, now moved with confidence as she gathered herbs, ground roots, and etched sigils into the earth. Her voice, once soft, now held weight when she chanted the old songs. Emotionally she shifted. The girl who had cried alone beneath the baobab in Aguama was changing. The pain hadn't left her, it never would, but it had transformed. It no longer dragged her down. It pushed her forward. She no longer dreamed of begging for justice. She dreamed of creating it. Magura tested her with questions that had no answers. What is justice when all are guilty? Can the river punish the stone for standing still? What is mercy without memory? Through these lessons, Naya began to see the world not as right or wrong, but as layers upon layers of cause, consequence, and choice. Power wasn't in fire or wind, it was in restraint, in understanding, in knowing when to act and when to let the spirits decide. One night, she stood in the center of the grove, arms outstretched as wind and leaves circled her in a slow dance. The spirits rose in whispers around her. Her eyes turned silver for a breath. Her voice echoed with their song. "You are ready," Magura said. Naya turned. Ready for what? To return. Not as a girl scorned, but as a woman reborn. Naya looked down at her hands. They trembled, not from fear but from something else. Purpose. Power. Truth. She had walked through fire. She had been broken and rebuilt by forces older than time. And now the wind spoke her name not as a question but as a promise. The wind blew warm over Aguama as the village dressed itself in color and illusion. Bright cloths were strung between huts, drums echoed from dawn until twilight, and the scent of roasted yam and palm stew thickened the air. It was the festival of masks, when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest, and spirits were said to walk the village in disguise. It was a time of celebration, of reverence, of fear and wonder. Children painted their faces, men carved new masks, and women sang the songs of their foremothers. For once, even the stern elders smiled, cloaked in feathered masks, pretending not to recognize one another. And in the center of it all, praised like a goddess returned, stood Zina. Draped in gold cloth, her arms covered in bangles that clinked with every movement, she moved through the crowd like royalty. The chief's wife stood behind her, hands gently resting on Zina's shoulders, smiling a snake's smile. The villagers bowed, cheered, whispered. They spoke of how wise Zina had become, how she had taken up Mama Agba's mantle after the old healer had grown silent with grief and wandered into seclusion. They said Zina had brought the village balance again. They forgot, conveniently, the girl who had been made to walk the thorns. They forgot her screams. They buried memory beneath laughter and praise. But the dead did not forget. And neither did Naya. She returned not through the front path, not in the light of day. She came in silence, cloaked in a veil woven from midnight. Her mask was carved from ebony and painted with symbols only the spirits understood. It was not beautiful, it was ancient, terrifying in its silence, with eyes like hollow wells and lips marked with sacred ash. She walked with dancers from the mountain, strangers invited for the festival. No one noticed her among them. No one thought to wonder if the spirits among them were more than masks and stories. Naya's heart thundered in her chest. It was not fear, it was memory. Every scent, every laugh, every corner of the village struck her like a drumbeat. She passed the spot where Zina had spilled her herbs. She walked by the tree where the elders had sentenced her. She saw the path where the thorns had drunk her blood. And in each place she did not cry. She remembered. That first night she danced. Her limbs moved not with joy but with truth. She danced for the girl who had been betrayed. She danced for the mothers silenced by tradition. She danced for the ones who had no voice. And though her movements were unfamiliar to the villagers, something about them stilled the air. Children stared. Elders whispered. Even Zina paused, frowning slightly, as if a forgotten ghost had brushed her skin. Naya spoke to no one. She observed. She saw the young girl slapped by a village matron for questioning her role in a song. She watched a boy dragged away in tears for accidentally knocking over the chief's ceremonial drum. She heard women whisper about stolen herbs, bruises explained away by discipline, and fear wrapped in silence. The village had not changed. If anything, it had grown darker in her absence. Tradition had become a weapon, and power was a mask worn with pride. Zina walked at the head of it all, praised for her wisdom and vision. She had taken Mama Agba's hut and turned it into a shrine to herself, filled with herbs she didn't understand and prayers she didn't believe. The children she healed were fed lies. The herbs she offered were copied from books she had stolen. Yet no one questioned her. because the truth had been buried with Naya's screams. But now Naya was among them again. Watching. Waiting. Magura's teachings echoed in her heart. Justice waits. It is not a hammer. It is a wind that moves when the trees forget how to stand. She saw her moment drawing closer. One evening, as the village feasted, Naya slipped into the shadows and followed Xena. The false healer had retreated to her private shrine, alone, carrying offerings of wine and feathers. Naya's steps made no sound. She watched through a crack in the woven wall as Xena removed her golden robe and sighed, muttering curses beneath her breath. She tossed sacred offerings aside and poured wine not for ancestors but for herself. "I am the fire of this village," Xena whispered to her reflection in a polished bowl. "They all kneel now. Even that old hag is gone. I won." Naya's fingers curled around the amulet at her neck, a piece of spirit stone given to her by Magura, carved with her ancestral sigil. It pulsed with warmth, urging restraint. The next day she watched as the elders prepared for the final ritual, the calling of the spirits, when one dancer would be chosen to speak as a vessel of the dead. Xena, of course, had positioned herself to be chosen. It would be the crowning of her power. The village would see her as not just healer but prophet. Naya stepped into the circle that morning as one of the dancers. Her mask gleamed beneath the sun. Her silence was a song the village had forgotten it knew. They would remember. She would not strike too early, nor too late. The wind had begun to shift. The baobabs groaned faintly. The crows had returned to their branches. Justice was coming. And she would wear a mask. The sky turned copper as the final day of the Festival of Masks began. A slow wind whispered through the baobab trees, carrying with it the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen and the weight of things unsaid. Villagers gathered in the sacred circle, voices hushed in anticipation. Today was the calling, when one dancer would be chosen to speak with the voice of the ancestors. Drums beat low and steady, a heartbeat echoed across generations. Masks shimmered in every direction, colors bright and strange, each face a mystery, each movement watched by spirits unseen. Naya stood among them, her mask expressionless, carved from blackwood and ringed with ash. The eyes were hollow, but within them burned something far older than pain. Xena stood directly across the circle, her own mask golden and smiling, eyes glittering with the certainty of power. She raised her arms and began her dance, graceful, rehearsed, hollow. The crowd clapped, entranced. But when Naya moved, the air changed. She began slowly, arms curling like smoke, feet silent as wind. Her body became a story, of a girl betrayed, of a walk over fire, of exile and awakening. Her every step drew the attention of something deeper than the crowd. The drums faltered as if even they were unsure whether to follow. Crows circled above. Leaves danced without wind. Shadows seemed to stretch from the edges of the circle, reaching. Then in the middle of the sacred dance, Naya stopped. She reached up with steady hands. And removed her mask. Gasps erupted like thunder. Some villagers recoiled. Others dropped to their knees. A few screamed. Naya's face was unchanged but different, wiser, older in the way fire ages would. Her eyes held storms. Her scars glowed faintly in the light, reminders of what the village had done. Children clutched their mothers. Elders trembled. A boy whispered, "She's a ghost," and hid behind his father. Xena froze mid-step. Her mask slipped. Her smile cracked. Naya raised her voice. "I'm not a ghost. I am what you made. I walked the path you forced me upon, but I did not die. The spirits took me in. They showed me your hearts." She turned slowly, facing each corner of the crowd. "I returned not for revenge. I returned for truth." A gust of wind exploded through the circle. Candles blew out. Ash lifted from the earth. The baobabs groaned and animals cried in unison. The air shimmered as the veil between worlds thinned until it was nearly gone. And then they came. The spirits. They did not walk as men or women but as shapes in smoke and flickers in fire, as animals with human eyes, as shadows that pulsed with memory. The villagers fell silent as the ancestors filled the space between them. The air buzzed with voices layered atop voices. Naya lifted her arms and spoke the words Magura had taught her, the call of reckoning, a rite not uttered in generations. Her voice rang through the clearing, low and unshaking, calling each spirit by name, beckoning truth from the roots of the earth. The ground trembled. A crack tore through the center of the circle, glowing faintly with blue light. Whispers emerged from below, voices of those long dead. Some villagers began to weep. Others dropped their masks and covered their faces. Xena stood paralyzed, her hands shaking. The time for silence has ended, Naya said, her voice layered now with spirit tones. Let the truth be spoken. One by one the guilty were called forward, not by Naya but by the spirits themselves. The elder who had accepted Xena's secret gift stepped forward, mouth trembling. I took beads to lie, he said, voice cracking. I knew she stole the herbs. The woman who had claimed to see Naya sneaking into the shrine collapsed. I lied. Xena promised me medicine for my son. A guard stepped out, face pale. We were told to plant the leaves in her mat. I didn't know why. I didn't ask. Each word echoed across the clearing, rising with the wind. Then the ancestors called for the chief. He stepped into the light, robes heavy with silence. I knew, he said. I knew she was innocent. But the people wanted blood. I let it happen. Finally, Xena was pulled to the center by invisible hands. Her feet scraped against the dirt. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow. You lied, Naya said, stepping closer. You twisted trust into envy. You poisoned the hearts of others for your gain. Xena fell to her knees. Please? I didn't know they would make you walk the path. I only wanted them to listen to me. You could have been more than me, Naya said quietly. But you chose to be less. The spirits surrounded her, their forms swirling, their murmurs rising. The villagers looked on, some ashamed, some broken. Naya raised a hand and silence returned. The sun rose slow and golden over the endless savanna, casting long shadows across the land. The baobab trees stood tall and silent, guardians of memory and time. In the village of Aguama, the morning air was filled with the scent of wood smoke, wildflowers, and something older still, story. Children gathered beneath the great baobab, the one with the hollow trunk and the twisting roots that dipped into the sacred earth. It was said to be the oldest living thing in the village, older than the chiefdom, older even than the first drumbeat. Today the children sat cross-legged in its shade, eyes wide, mouths quiet, waiting. And in front of them stood a woman with salt-silver hair and a voice like morning thunder, wrapped in red and white cloth, her face marked by the sacred dust. Tell us, one child said, tugging at the hem of her cloth. Tell us the story of the girl who walked on thorns. The woman smiled, not gently, but with the weight of someone who had seen too much and lived through it all. She was not just a girl, she began, voice low, drawing the children in. She was fire wrapped in skin. She was silence that turned into song. She was pain that refused to die quietly. The children leaned forward. Long ago in this very village, the woman continued, there was a girl named Naya. She was kind, clever, and quiet, a healer's daughter, a girl of spirit and listening. But the world, as you know, does not always love the quiet. And there were those who envied her light. So the story unfolded again as it had for years and would for generations. The betrayal. The false accusations. The cruel punishment of the thorn path. The exile. The forest. The spirits. The return. And she came back, the storyteller whispered, not with weapons, not with rage, but with truth. She returned in silence and shadows, with the spirits behind her and fire beneath her feet. She danced with the dead. She made the wind speak. And she brought down liars with nothing but her voice. Did she kill them? One child asked, wide-eyed. The woman shook her head. No, that was not her way. She offered them a choice, truth or exile. And when the thorns bled them as they once bled her, she did not smile. She simply watched. She was the spirit of justice, another child said proudly. Not just justice, the woman corrected. Balanced justice. Not revenge. Not cruelty. But truth even when it hurts. The children were quiet for a moment, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, imagining the ancestors murmuring just out of reach. Is she really gone? One of the younger girls asked. Or is she still here? The woman didn't answer immediately. She looked up into the branches of the baobab, the light catching the lines on her face. She left her body behind, she said finally. But Naya walks still, in every truth spoken when it would be easier to lie. In every silence broken when injustice tries to hide. In every child who walks the path of courage. The children turned their heads. The path still wound its way through the village, once lined with cruel thorns, now layered with healing herbs, soft petals, and sacred ash. It had become a rite of passage for the young. Each year, when the rains returned and the ancestors stirred in the soil, children would walk it, one by one, watched by the whole village. Not in shame. Not in punishment. But in strength. To declare themselves. To claim their courage. And now it was that time again. A small girl stood at the beginning of the path. Her name was Amani and today was her day. She wore a wrap stitched by her mother and beads braided into her hair. Her small feet were bare, her face serious but unafraid. Her father knelt beside her and whispered, "Do you know why you walk today?" She nodded. "To remember. To be strong. To speak." He kissed her forehead and stepped back. Amani took a breath. The drums began, soft, rhythmic, ancestral. The path shimmered in the morning light, laid with sweet herbs and gentle blossoms. Amani looked forward, then down the line of villagers gathered, some humming, some holding hands, all silent. She took her first step. The petals shifted under her toes. The breeze wrapped around her, warm and sweet. She felt it then, a presence, watching. Not like a ghost but like a memory alive in the air. Up in the trees, the leaves stirred without wind. And for a heartbeat, the sun caught on something that wasn't bark or leaf, something brighter. A flicker of a figure. A girl, young and strong, standing on a branch with wild hair and eyes like fire. Her feet were bare. Her arms were folded. And though she said nothing, her spirit pulsed like a drumbeat through the village. Amani smiled. She walked on, steady and proud, never once looking back. And as she reached the end of the path, the village exhaled together. A new voice had entered the circle. A new truth-bearer had risen. Naya, the girl who had walked the thorns, now walked the branches. She had become a whisper carried by firelight, a shadow seen in dreams, a spirit of justice and flame. Her name was etched in stories, but her real legacy lived in the silence before a child spoke truth, in the trembling moment before courage bloomed. She was not a ghost. She was not a goddess. She was a girl. A girl who had once been hurt, and who had turned that hurt into something sacred. They called her Naya the Flame Walker, the last thorn bearer, the spirit of the path. But the children simply called her the one who watches. And every time one of them stood barefoot at the edge of the path, they looked to the trees, not in fear but in expectation, and smiled, because they knew she was there. Always. "I will not spill blood," she said. "That is the way of cowards and tyrants. But justice demands a price." She turned to Zena, to the chief, to those who had confessed. "You have two choices. Walk the path of thorns, not as I did for punishment but for truth. Let the pain cleanse what remains of your pride. Or leave this place and never return. Let your names be forgotten." The chief, shamed and weeping, bowed his head. "I will walk." Zena shook her head, fury and fear battling in her eyes. "You want me to suffer for what? For ambition? For wanting a place in a world that only loved you?" "I wanted nothing," Naya whispered. "You stole everything." Zena spat. "Then I leave." The spirits parted. The path opened. One by one the guilty chose. Some knelt and prepared for the thorns, heads bowed, steps hesitant. Others turned and walked toward the forest, toward exile, their faces already fading in the memory of the village. When it was over, the ground sealed itself. The spirits, satisfied, lifted like mist into the sky. The sun pierced the clouds, casting golden light over the circle. And Naya, mask in hand, stood alone in the silence of truth. The sun rose soft and warm over Aguama, its light filtered gently through the high branches of the baobab trees. The village stirred not with fear or ritual dread, but with anticipation, the kind that felt like the beginning of a song. The festival of masks had ended, but something far greater was just beginning. The old wounds still ached, but now healing was in the air, carried in the hands of women preparing baskets of herbs, in the voices of children singing new songs, and in the measured steps of the girl who had returned from exile as more than just herself. Naya stood alone at the edge of the forest, where the thorn path once began, where she had bled, cried, and become something the village feared and admired in equal measure. But today the thorns were gone. She had pulled them herself, one by one, with bare hands and silent prayer. In their place, she had laid down soft earth, sweet-smelling roots, crushed leaves of lemongrass and cassia, petals of wildflowers, and strands of sacred vine blessed by the spirit grove. Behind her, the village gathered. No one knew exactly what would happen. Naya had told no one. Only that she had called for them to witness, to participate, to listen. The elders came with bowed heads, the women with open palms, the children with wide, hopeful eyes. The men came too, some out of guilt, some out of curiosity, but none dared speak too loudly. Naya turned, her hair wrapped in white cloth, her face unpainted, her feet bare. The wind moved gently through her robes, and around her neck hung the spirit stone from Magura, glowing faintly like embers beneath ash. She raised her voice, clear and steady. "This is the place where I was broken," she began. "You brought me here in chains. You watched me walk upon thorns and bleed for lies. You gave pain the name of tradition. But pain, I have learned, is not sacred. Suffering is not holy. Truth does not need punishment to shine. A murmur stirred in the crowd. She continued. Today we change that. Today we reclaim this ground. We make the path new, not a trail of agony but a road of courage. She stepped aside and gestured to the path of fragrant herbs. I call this the path of courage. And it will be walked not by the accused, not by the shamed, but by the brave, the young, the uncertain, the hopeful. Those ready to claim their strength not through silence or fear, but through truth, through spirit, through story. From the crowd, a small girl stepped forward. She could not have been more than 8. Her mother held her shoulders, but the child moved on her own, bare feet touching the beginning of the path. Naya knelt and offered her a small charm, a carved seed of the fire tree wrapped in copper thread. Do you walk in truth? Naya asked. The girl nodded. Then walk in courage. And the girl stepped forward, her tiny feet brushing the healing herbs, the sacred petals, the softened ground. She did not cry. She did not flinch. She walked slowly, each step deliberate as the crowd held its breath. When she reached the end, the village erupted in song, not the old chants of guilt, but a new melody that rose spontaneously, as if the ancestors themselves had exhaled it through the mouths of the living. Another girl came forward. Then another. Then a boy, his hands trembling but his face determined. Each one walked the path. And with each step, something heavy lifted from the hearts of those watching. It became a procession. A new rite. Mothers wept softly. Fathers turned their faces to hide tears. Naya stood to the side, silent, hands clasped, spirit humming. When the last child had walked, the elders stepped forward. The oldest among them, a woman with silver hair and the voice of cracked earth, fell to her knees before Naya. You carry the flame now, she said. Will you lead us? A hush fell. Naya looked at them, at the ones who had once sentenced her, who now sought her guidance. She saw both their shame and their sincerity. She saw their fear, still clinging in corners of their eyes, and the hope that had begun to bloom, fragile and flickering. She bowed her head and replied, I lead from behind the flame. I am not your chief, not your elder. I am your reminder, your witness. I will walk with you, not in front of you. The fire is not mine to hold, it belongs to all who burn with truth. A silence followed. Then the eldest nodded. Then you shall be the keeper of the path. Naya accepted the title not with pride but with gravity. She knew what it meant. To guard the sacred, to protect the vulnerable, to listen when others shouted, and to walk even when the way was unclear. She turned back to the path, watching children now scatter wildflowers along its length. In the distance, smoke from the old shrine drifted upward as the chief's abandoned robe was burned to ash. Xena was gone. The corrupt were gone. What remained was broken, but broken things Naya knew could be reforged. Later that night she returned to the spirit grove. Not in body but in spirit, seated beneath the baobab tree where her grandmother once told stories. The wind carried the scent of healing. In her mind she saw Magura smiling, heard the voices of ancestors humming with satisfaction. You walked the thorns and returned with roots, one whispered. You bled, said another, and turned your blood into bloom. In her heart Naya whispered back, I do not lead. I remember. And the spirits in all their forms, wind, shadow, bird and fire, sang back as one. You are flame born from pain. You are the thorn turned to flower. You are the path made new. And in the quiet that followed, Naya closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her, steady and alive. She was no longer the girl from the forgotten village. She was the keeper of courage. The child of both thorn and root. And the flame would never go out.